So here's a question. With the incredible pace of change in today's car world, what do us car guys and gals consider a real BMW? This, or perhaps even this? Now, I'm kind of sending on a fool's errand here because I don't expect you to agree on any of it. That's why you and I are going to go on a journey today. A journey not to find out what Munich tells us is the ultimate driving machine, but rather what we consider Freude am Fahren. £150. 150 pounds is the difference between an M2, which I love, and the M2 Competition. But if you do some quick back-of-the-envelope math, that's about a 5% increase in weight. What the hell did they change? That, the M2, was an inline 3-liter turbo 6. This is an inline 3-liter turbo 6. But digging a bit deeper, this is an S55, not an N55, so basically the same engine family as the M3 and 4. And really it's all about breathing, and if we dig even further, it's more about regulations, emissions controls in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. So they're getting ready for it. But that translates to 40 more horsepower for us, 405, and 63 pounds of torque more. But here's the thing, comes in at 700 RPMs more aggressive, so 2,300 is peak torque. So now the weight is 3,600 for this car, as God intended, or 3,655 for the automatic. Bist du fertig? Ich auch. Oh my God, I love this thing! This is magnificent! It's heavier, more horsepower, but man, 700 RPM difference and where that torque comes in doesn't make a difference. Holy crap! So we've already covered this as the S55, but that is not the only thing that comes from the M3 and the M4. It turns out this as well, the strut, and there's two things going on here. Number one, what it's constructed of. It's carbon fiber reinforced polymer, which we looked at in really gory detail in the i3 and the i8 episodes. And then there's, why is it important? Now, we could talk about it adding to the structural rigidity of a small sports sedan, but I can't honestly tell you that it is 2%, 10%, or 25% more effective than the car we drove, 2.5 years ago on Laguna Seca. But what I can say is this. From the first moment I got in the car and probably over a 48-hour period from there, you couldn't help notice balance. You don't think that this is what an M3 should be, or this is what BMW should be building, or this is really on par with Caymans and cars you wouldn't think it should be. And would you really say it's because of pieces like this? No. But I would argue it's a combination, or really the sum of parts like this. Even being a bit of a minimalist, I'm not fussed by the lack of adjustability in the suspension. The theme is, it's Goldilocks, it's just right. However, the steering, they did make some changes, and there is adjustability. Right now we're in comfort. You do feel weight when you push the steering hard. Full disclosure, driving down the road, it does have a bit of vagueness to it. But let's say we go to Sport Plus, we'll forget about Sport. Get a little more aggressive here, come around this turn, elevation change. And the thing you notice is not so much the weight, it really doesn't change, it's the speed of the steering that changes. If I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, this adjustability is more for a track than it is driving around town. So it is not just the engine that has a significant amount of change, it's the brakes as well. The diameter of the rotors all the way around has increased. In the back, they go from 370 mils to 380 mils, so what's that, just under 15 inches. In the front, it goes from 380 mils to 400 mils, so that's what, 15.75 inches, thereabouts. But it's not just the rotors, it's the calipers as well. They go from 2 piston in the back to 4, and in the front, they go from 4 to 6. That's a hell of a lot of difference in the brakes. I really didn't see that one coming. But you and I still need to test it out. No one's behind us, please. Do not try this at home. the theme of this episode. This is what an M3 used to be, and the BMW you want. I will tell you, around town, thing you notice immediately when you get behind the wheel of this thing is not the added power, it's how touchy the brakes are. Around a neighborhood like this, or generally around town, it probably is a bit too much brake. But if you really do take this thing on the track, it's probably just enough. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game and mine, the options game. Today's contestant, the 2019 BMW M2 Competition Coupe, for a manufacturer suggested retail price of $58,900. To that, we add a stunning shade of sunset orange metallic, which is quickly becoming the de facto BMW color, $550. You could use that budget to buy a stunning shade of blue, which is really more my speed. Sadly, black is included. Then the first option is the executive package that adds the auto dimming LED headlights, Wi-Fi hotspot, heated steering wheel, stuff like that, $1,200. Then there's an interesting trend here. If you could see here, everything says included. Stuff like navigation, 19-inch wheels, sport seats, the M steering wheel, cool stuff like that. But here's the thing I'm going to point out to you. In previous rounds of this game, you and I have bitched about wireless or any kind of CarPlay charging $50 a month or $300. Here, gladly it says included. So I would say vielen Dank to those in Munich. Then the only option on top of that is really a package, the M driver's package. Why is this important? Well, it raises the top speed from 150 miles an hour, which is kind of like a gentleman's agreement with all the manufacturers in Germany, to 173 miles an hour, so we like that even for $2,500. Then we add a destination charge for $985 for a total suggested retail price of $64,145. Now I am going to say this, there's one option missing, and that is the moonroof, which is indeed available, so I'm going to say vielen Dank. Yep, this is indeed a great road, but we're going to dial it back a bit for a specific reason, and that is functionality and ergonomics. So my friend got one of those, just had dinner with him last night, and he's like super excited over the moon. And I am not one of these people who, in the car world, you've seen them on Twitter, that hate Elon, anything to do with Tesla. I come from the tech world, huge respect for what they've done. I have disagreements with some functionality and some claims, but overall, my biggest problem with the Tesla is the ergonomics. You can't tell me that a screen here is something you need in a car. Because think about this, if I get aggressive on a road like this, and I want to adjust the temperature, and my eyes aren't here, they're over here looking on a screen because there's no real feedback, and please don't tell me haptic feedback works in a car, you're going to go off there. You're not going to be looking here. Remember, first rule of racing, where you look is where you go. Okay, so I'm confused. While not exactly the most expensive car in the world, this is certainly far from the cheapest car in the world. So why is it that the only color on offer inside the M2 competition is black? Yes, the folks in Munich, out of the kindness of their hearts, will give you a choice between either blue or orange stitching for 65 grand. Am I the only one that finds this odd? And if you agree, what other colors would you want on offer? Let me know in the comments below. Not exactly the bastion of the manual transmission, now is it? And that is exactly the point. One of the most magical manuals on offer. I'm not here to sell you on getting a manual. I'm here to show that this is incredibly usable in your neighborhood. The clutch is light, but still perfectly matched for the power of this engine, and the throws are just the right distance. The feel of the shifter is the right height. That's why, I did drive the automatic on that. Remember we did the Z4, or Z4, the 850 and the 340. We did that all in one track day. What I didn't shoot was my martini shot, which was this car with the BMW factory coilovers, their accessory coilovers, and their automatic transmission. It was good, it shifts fast. I can't say it's a bad transmission. And here's the point. I can't honestly say that that transmission, the auto, was appreciably better in terms of usability in environments like this, your neighborhood. Now here's something that I find incredibly fascinating, especially for a street car. You and I talk a lot about what goes into suspensions, whether it's multi-links in the rear, McPherson strut in the front, or double wishbones, but we never talk about bushings. Maybe we do a little bit, but only when it's something very unique like it was in the CT6. But here, the engineers made some changes. There is a different subframe in the back here. It's made out of steel, and think of it as like a cage. And then the rear axle is contained within that cage, and that in turn is attached to the back or the underside of the vehicle, to the body. But in most serial production road cars, there are bushings in between that subframe and the body, and that's to make it more compliant, more usable on bad roads. But on track cars, they don't put these bushings in to increase the driving dynamics, make it more balanced, because there is a specific purpose for something like this. Well, the BMW engineers have completely done away with the bushings in the rear, and while I can't sit here and say it adds so much more dimension, it falls under the heading of like that strut in the front, that here's another thing that is added to the pile of more than the sum of its parts. Okay, that's a change I really didn't see coming, and this is really what paid dividends. How do we deal with pitch, squat, dive, roll, basically all of the movements of the vehicle, different planes of motion. The M2 was already magnificent in this area. And to say there is a huge difference, even with all that change back there, that would be a flat-out lie. So this falls under the heading of seriously geeking out. The battery, it's fitted to the rear of the M2 Competition. And this goes a long way to the near-perfect weight distribution. So in this one, a manual, it's 51.9 in the front, 48.1 in the back, and 52.4 in the front and 47.6 in the back on an automatic. Now, serious question, I did not tell you in the options game how much the automatic is. It's $2,900. That's about 5% of the base price of this thing. Would you spend that for an automatic? And I'm being dead serious here. Let me know in the comments below or via our social media, MotoManTV on Word, MotoManTV on Word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Let's go back to driving dynamics for just a minute. I've had to give this a lot of thought over the past week. And is this setup back there different? No. I think this is the reality. I just forgot how magnificent this car was to drive as a regular M2, and now that I'm back into it, 2 years later? Pardon the interruption, but I'm looking at this edit, and I am struggling. I do not feel I am doing an effective job conveying the importance of this to you, broken car guys and gals like me, from behind the wheel. So I've taken some time to reflect, and I feel this is a much more succinct way to put it. Over the past 10 years, I have shared with you a very short list of cars that I would actually write a check for. They are any Lotus with the exception of a Europa, and frankly, I am very disenchanted with them at the moment, but put that aside. A 991.1 Targa manual, any GT3, yes, even with a PDK, a Challenger, and then as of late, I would probably add either a Land Cruiser or a G-Wagon, most likely Land Cruiser because of its reliability, but that is a specific tool for a specific job, so that comes when I finally get this lake house in Oregon that I want. But I would now add this to that list. And not because it's an M or it's a BMW or whatever. I would add the M2 Competition because it is one of the most beautifully balanced vehicles without getting into kit car territory like a Lotus, but not being 150 grand like a 991.1 Targa. And then on top of that, I feel because it's not as complex as other BMWs, it will not be a reliability nightmare where I may even venture to own it past the warranty. No guarantee there. Now, to further underscore this, when I say I would write a check for it, I have a very significant philosophical problem, because you guys know me as a Dave Ramsey guy, as a cheapskate, that I am way against leasing and financing, and I have a problem with people on YouTube or other platforms saying, I bought the cheapest whatever, or I bought a supercar, or look at what I got. And most of them got it because they're financing it, leasing it, or their parents paid for it. When I say I'd write a check for this car, I'm talking the friction of writing a check for this car. That's how important it is. Even in an M2 competition, it's not all fun and games. Sometimes you gotta face reality. So that means traffic and red lights and wireless Apple CarPlay, which I have to say works very well. Although something I, for the life of me, I can't figure out how to work in this car. This one, as we talked about in the options game, has the executive package, whatever it is, that gives one the wireless charge plate here. And for the life of me, I cannot get this thing to work at all. Like here, I'll pull this out here. Here's my fancy phone. Nothing. No charging. Why? Like, there's no setting in here to turn it on and off. And I've checked that this thing actually has wireless charging, and sure enough, it doesn't work. So, yeah. Anyway, that's what I got. That is the closest thing to a BMW BMW makes. Bis später.